Welcome back. Today we'll explore the SwarShala instruments, how they are stored in base files, and how they can be played using different sounds called patches. SwarShala includes up to 76 Indian instruments so far. You can see them here in this drop-down list. These instruments also come with lots of ready-made loops each, as you can see here within these folders. As we have seen in a previous video that a sequence can be made out of other sequences, it made sense to group all these loops in a common file. This is what we call a base file. Base files are stored in the data folder of the app, as you can see here. Each base file contains an instrument definition along with folders and rhythmic or melodic sequences. For instance, the tabla SSB file here will contain the structure of the tabla instrument with all its strokes, along with all the tabla rhythms and the folder's structure to contain them. You can load a base file manually by clicking on File, Open Base, in which case the instrument it represents will be added to the drop-down list. But normally you would simply add the base name to the Autoload field in the Preferences Data Files dialog. In this way, the base will be auto-loaded every time you run SwarShala. Now I mentioned the instrument definition. What is that? Let's take the example of tabla. As you can see in this sequence, each cell can contain a certain number of tabla strokes. These are the ones that are defined for that instrument. So we can say that an instrument definition is a predefined set of individual strokes. But it is a little more elaborate than that. If you play na and ge in the first cell, that is a dha by the way, and a ti in the second cell, you want the first two strokes to play together, and then playback of the na to be interrupted for the te to start, while the ge of the first cell keeps playing. That would be the natural way, since na and te are both played with the same hand, while the ge is playing on the left drum alone. To achieve that, we have divided an instrument into parts. For tabla you have a left hand part and a right hand part, each with its own specific strokes, as you can see in this diagram. Sounds of a same part are mutually exclusive. That is, if you play tin after a na in a sequence, SwarShala will stop the playing na and then only play your tin. This is to emulate real-life strokes. So this is the case for most Indian drums, where you have two different parts, each with its specific strokes. Now how does it work for melodic instruments? Well, the structure is similar, except that instead of predefined strokes, we have all the notes over 10 or so octaves. But we also use the separate parts. Let's take the example of sitar. Sitar has 4 main strings, then chikari strings, then sympathetic strings. These should play independently, like if you hit the chikari string, the main strings shouldn't stop playing, and vice versa. So the sitar structure is as shown here. This is one of the most complex melodic instruments though. A majority of others only have a single part like bansuri, sarangi, shenai, etc. Now we come to playback. In SwarShala, like in all other Swar system software, we have separated the instrument sequences from their actual playback. This makes sense if you think of the example of sitar just discussed previously. Its structure is exactly the same as the one of sarod. So if we create a base for each, we would have to duplicate each sequence. Instead, we have a single virtual instrument called strings, and all the sequences created for it can play either with sitar or sarod sounds. This is all transparent to the user because you still see two different instruments in SwarShala, but say if you rename one folder here, then you see that it's also updated on the other instrument. But how does this play with sitar or sarod sounds work? Here comes the magic of MIDI. MIDI is a language that was invented a very long time ago for keyboards, and that in short describes what exact key was pressed for how long, and with what intensity. This information then goes through a sound generator or synthesizer that is in charge of translating this key's information into actual sound. The genius of the system is that the user can change the voice being played at wish, without changing the keyboard itself. Well, we are using the same system in SwarShala. Rhythmic and melodic sequences generate MIDI events on the fly that go through a synthesizer, and that synthesizer has all our instrument sounds available as patches. This allows us to play the same sequence over sitar, sarod, or even bansuri if we want, or for instance to play a tabla sequence with normal, high, or low-pitched tabla sounds. Alright, I hope this video has given you a clearer idea about instruments, patches and basses in SwarShala. Feel free to contact us if you have any question about this topic or anything else. In the meantime, I take your leave and wish you all the best in your musical endeavors.